Welcome to Church Media HQ. I am your host, Luke Clayton, and I'm glad you've joined me for today's episode. Well, a lot of church websites, they're struggling. And this past year, we've really learned how to put our focus on our online presence. And a lot of that, in terms of the church world, has gone to our online worship experiences. And that is really important. And we've dedicated a lot of episodes over the past few months to discuss that. However, I want to shift our focus to talk about something that may have kind of been overlooked in recent years, or recent months rather, or maybe not, depending on your church, and that is the church website itself. We're going to talk a little bit about church online. We're going to touch on that here later, but I want to talk about the overall online experience that your church is creating, specifically when it comes to its website. The first and foremost thing you have to realize, though, is that this requires a shift in your paradigm to the mindset that your website is for those who have never been to your church. While those who already are a part of your church will interact with your site, your church's website exists to reach outsiders, not those already in your church. And if I have to convince you of that, then just click skip on this episode, because that is the entire premise of what we are going to be discussing. Now, the second thing you have to realize is that your website should look good. The content we're going to go over here is not particularly going to address the importance of good design and aesthetic appeal, because I think this should already be understood. The unfortunate thing that we see is websites that look good, but they are really poor. They were still, from a messaging and content perspective, they're still very poorly designed. So you can have good aesthetics and good visuals, but still have a poorly designed website. In fact, a lot of websites in general are ineffective. We're not just picking, again, I always like to take that step back from time to time so that you understand I'm not just picking on churches. This is unfortunately something that just kind of dominates the website world in general, and that is poorly designed websites when it comes to functionality and the practicality of the person visiting. So as we get started, the first thing we want to discuss are some global rules. So these are some rules that really should apply to just about anything. They can apply to your website, but a lot of them can apply to your just promotional content in general. So when it comes to written content, the written content of your website, in this case, less is more. Very few people are going to take the time to read more than just headlines and maybe a couple lines of text. So, writing long paragraphs, and yes, we'll talk about blogs and articles and maybe the place for those. But when we're talking about your general website information, less is more. You want to use photos of real people in your church, if at all possible, and you want to show them smiling and enjoying your church. Stock images aren't always best, as they can convey a literal false image of your church. So you say, well, how do I do that? I don't have any photos. Well, I think the most practical thing you can do is hire a photographer to take quality photos of the people at your church at least once a year. I'm not talking about a church directory photo shoot. I'm talking about a photographer that comes in and takes candid photos. And I think this is an excellent investment. To do this at least once a year, you are going to see this pay off, because these photos can be used on your website, your promotional materials, and having some come in at least on a yearly basis is going to keep those images fresh, keep the new images, or keep new images, if you will, kind of in your library, your catalog of things to access when it comes to developing promotion materials, updating your website. And so this is a great idea. And you want to make sure that these people are smiling. You want to get photos of people that are happy to be at your church. According to a study by a professor of psychology named Dr. Riggio, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, the smiling coaxes the release of serotonin, which is a feel-good chemical. And this happens in the brain, both by the person smiling and by the observer. So when you see someone, think about that. I mean, just in a real situation, a face-to-face scenario where you're maybe interacting with someone, you have the when they smile or when they laugh, that can tend to be contagious. Smiling, seeing a smile makes you smile. Seeing someone happy in return typically makes you happy. And so this may seem like a really obvious thing, but you want to capture pictures of people that are smiling. And this is why, if you have the right photographer, again, someone who's professional, it's not a bad idea to quote unquote stage some of these photos. Now, we don't want to stage them to the extreme that it truly looks fake, but we want to stage real life incidents. So, for example, you have someone at, passing, taking their child and checking them into the kids class or kids program, and getting smiling and interacting with that child, that the children's worker or whatever it may be. That's something that you can gladly take it. You can take a family and you can take that children's volunteer and you can have them interact. Kind of, hey, let's reenact that, if you will. And yes, it might seem a little bit uncomfortable, and again, you don't want it to seem too staged, but don't be afraid to stage some of this stuff to get the photos and videos that you might be looking for. I could think of times we've been on video shoots with other churches, and we've actually asked the pastor to preach to an empty auditorium, and so that we could take some really nice close-up shots of him preaching, and that content almost always makes the cut of the video we're making and can even be used for great footage on the website as well. So this idea of having professional photos done at least once a year, I think, again, is a great investment because these photos can be used on your website. Well, you say, I just really can't afford that. And I understand there's a lot of churches out there that just doesn't seem feasible, because to get a good photographer, you're going to be paying $500, maybe $1,000 or more to get a good photographer who knows what they're doing. And so this is what I would say. I always say, well, see what you can do for free, and surely you or someone in your church has a nice smartphone. And smartphone cameras, as we know, have come a long way over the past decade. And you can take their smartphone, their iPhone or Android phone or whatever it may be, and you can get some really good photos, and that are really, honestly, in many cases, very much acceptable for use on your website and promo materials. I'm thinking about portrait mode on iPhones in particular. If you take the right portrait mode shot, it really does look like it was shot on a professional camera. And so the key to taking good photography of any kind, but especially what they call iPhoneography, where you're shooting on your iPhone, is good lighting. As long as you've got good lighting, you should be able to capture some good photos. So that is a great place to start if you're unable to afford a professional. So when it comes to photos and videos, you really should avoid letting photos and videos be a dominant element of your promotional content, and in this case, your website. There is some exception to that, and we'll discuss that here later. But just remember, your church is obviously, you know this, your church is not a building, it's the people. And when you showcase and make it all about your building, all about your facilities, you can be unintentionally sending the wrong message. Another thing to consider as well is that whenever you showcase your buildings, if you've got maybe a larger building or a larger ministry with, more expansive and maybe even impressive facilities, while that might seem impressive to some, it can seem very intimidating to others. And so showcasing your buildings might in some ways get people to maybe not consider your church. So just keep in mind that it should never be a dominant aspect. I'm not saying there's no place for photos or videos of your building in your promotional materials. Again, we'll kind of discuss that here later in your website, particularly where there's an acceptable place for that. But overall, it should be people smiling. It should be about people, not about buildings. And your website, The final global rule is that your website must, and it would be great if it was, or here's an idea. No, it's essential. Your website must, absolutely has to be mobile compatible. The percentage of users who are browsing the web on their phone is ever increasing. I don't even like giving a stat for this because it seems like every time I try to look up a stat, it's increasing, it's going up. I know that here a couple years ago, it was well over half. And at this time, I would say it's got to be the vast majority of people are using their phones predominantly to browse the web as opposed to a computer. And so you've got to make your website mobile compatible. For some of you out there, you're saying, well, duh, that seems really obvious. But there's others out there, believe it or not, there are still websites that exist, especially in the church world, that do not have a mobile compatible version. And I'm not saying you have to go and invest into a mobile version in particular of your site. That used to be the thing that you did. You went and you found somebody to develop a mobile specific website, if you will, for your phone. And whenever they detected that the visitor was trying to access your website from a phone, they would send you to the mobile version. That still exists, but it's not near as necessary or even effective anymore. There are so many ways to make what's called a responsive site that basically is designed to respond to the size of your screen. So whether it's a phone, an iPad, a laptop, or a desktop monitor, whatever it may be, it's going to display a version that's compatible and looks good on that particular device. And here's another big reason why you have to, when it comes to the mobile compatibility, why it is essential. Google announced just a few years ago that now they are going to be indexing websites in their search engine results based on if the site is mobile compatible or not. So if your site is compatible with mobile, it has a responsive version that's friendly to mobile devices, it's going to favor your website in search results. So in other words, nowadays, if you don't have a mobile friendly, it's going to be very, very difficult for people to discover you organically on Google and other search engines. So needless to say, your website cannot afford to not be compatible with mobile devices. So these are our global rules. Like I said, these for the most part can apply to just about any aspect of your promotional materials. And so those are the global rules. Now, we're going to spend the next segment here talking a good bit about our homepage because the homepage is by far the most important. 95% of web visitors never make it past the first page that they land on. So all of your essential information should be included on the homepage. We're going to go over some of that essentials here in just a moment. And so this is something that's really important that you've got to make a priority. One of the big mistakes I see is a lot of what we're talking about, that stuff that should be included in some way on the homepage, just gets divided out into different pages on the website. And I'm not saying that some of these things don't need some type of dedicated page or website, but what we're going to go over is stuff that definitely needs to be mentioned, if nothing else, on your homepage, because if you don't, most people may never learn about it. So one of the most obvious, that seems the most obvious again, yet is often, I'm shocked and surprised how often it's overlooked, is the location of your church or your campus locations. This one may seem elementary, but it's shocking. Again, it's so shocking how many church websites make this hard to find. And so I was just thinking, or just saw an ad for a church the other day, and I tapped on it there on, I think it was an Instagram ad. So I tapped on it. I like to see, kind of what churches are promoting, and I like to see their websites, and I nerd out on that kind of stuff. And so I was looking over their website, and this church in particular actually had a couple of different they had a couple of different campuses, 2 campuses, I believe. They had a North Campus and a South Campus, I think. I kid you not, on the homepage, I could not find a physical address for either campus. And this was nor could I find some type of button that took me to the directions or to the to a map or to something like that. And I thought this is a huge oversight because this particular ad I saw on Easter weekend, and I couldn't help but think how many you invested. It was a nice website. Everything else about it was good. It looked good. The ad itself was good. And this church invested, who knows, probably hundreds, if not thousands of dollars into these ads. And they are getting people that are even clicking, in my case, or tapping on the ad to look at it. But yet when they get there, the information that they need to get connected with that church is not there. And so this is huge. Now, yes, we're living in a world that seems to be ever shifting to some type of hybrid of digital and physical worship. And yes, that's a controversial thing. Some people like it, some people don't, regardless of how you feel of it. It does seem to be happening. However, if physical ministry, if physically gathering is still a big part of your church, and it very likely is, then you need to let people know where they need to go and where that location is. You've got to include your physical address, the city and state, and all that good stuff. That has to be there on somewhere on your homepage. And this is where, when we talk about the locations, now this is where I would make kind of an exception when it comes to your buildings. It would be acceptable to have some small, again, you don't want to make it dominant, but some type of small photo of your building to accompany your addresses, or your address rather of your location. This is so that visitors can have maybe a landmark to recognize and to look for, especially if you have a particularly nice building that kind of stands out. That is maybe more recognizable. If your church is meeting in some type of storefront, or maybe it's not so obviously you don't have that obvious landmark that we're talking about, well then you might want to consider embedding some type of Google map or something so that people can see on a map and then go, oh, okay, your church is near that store and near that restaurant and on that street. It gives them a point of reference. I think that including one or both of those, at least one of those, is actually crucial because the physical address, while it is important, that alone doesn't give the visitor enough reference to know where your church is at. So your campus locations, again, this is really big. For most of you, it's just one location, but even if you have multiple ones, obviously you need to make this a dominant aspect, and it needs to be something that's on your homepage. The next big, what should be obvious thing to be included on websites, but again, it is crazy how I have gone to websites and seen that, and it's become difficult to find this information. That is your Sunday and or weekend services. So this is, you want to emphasize your Sunday worship services over other things like Bible studies or small group programs, and here's why. The Sunday morning, or maybe if you have a Saturday service, these are going to be the most, most churches, at most churches, I should say, is typically more evangelistic, and it's geared towards someone who is new to church. And if you are a church that offers multiple service types throughout the week, you know what I'm talking about. And most people that don't go to church typically or haven't been in a while, they are accustomed to the Sunday tradition of church. In fact, a lot of churches offer, many churches that do offer some type of Saturday night service, a lot of times they're doing that and they're encouraging their regular attenders to go to the Saturday night service so that they can actually make room for those on Sunday. The most popular time to go to church is typically sometime around the 10 o'clock hour on Sundays. That's what most people are kind of used to. It tends to be, when you look at the metrics of churches, that tends to be the services that lie closest to that 10 o'clock hour tend to be the higher attended services. And so all that to say that regardless if people have gone to church before or they're new to the whole concept, it doesn't really matter. They are used to the idea that Sunday morning is, if you're going to do church, Sunday morning is the time to do it. And so you want to make that obvious on your site that is something you have available. And here's the truth about people that are visiting your site. Many people that are new, that are going to be visiting your church for the first time. They are what I like to call low to no commitment type people. And so they aren't necessarily coming to church and saying, hey, I'm looking for a place I can go every week. Not necessarily. There might be some like that, but there are oftentimes people are saying, well, I haven't been to church in a while. It's a good thing to go to church. I always went to church growing up. I should go. And they go and they're just looking and saying, I'm just going to check in. I'm going to stop by, whatever. And a lot of times people are saying, you know what, I'm just going to visit. I'm going to see if this place is for me. They're not necessarily looking for, a place that I can commit to and get fully engaged with and whatnot. So what we're getting at here is that when you feature these multiple service types and programs on your homepage, it can make it seem as if your church is some type of organization that might require the attendance to more than just the once a week. Now, a lot of churches have a model where their assimilation process, their process of getting people more connected with their church, does involve multiple services during a week. They might have some type of in addition to the Sunday main services, they might have some type of a Sunday evening service as well, or they might have a midweek Bible study program, or some type of day of the week that's set aside to have on-site small group Bible study type things. And all that is fine. However, when people come and they say, oh, they've got Sunday morning service and then they've got Sunday night service and Wednesday nights, oh man, these guys, man, they really are asking to go to church a lot, aren't they? And that can take these, again, most people that are unchurched are going to be the low to no commitment people. And that can get them to say, you know what, I might look into something else. So even if your church, I'm not saying being disingenuous, I'm not encouraging you to be non-authentic. There is a place for these other types of services, and we're going to discuss that here in just a moment. I'm talking about the homepage. I'm talking about what you feature, what you talk about as far as your main offerings for church. Make your homepage dominant on those weekend services. So if it's just one Sunday service or multiple Sunday services, or like I said, you got some type of Saturday service, make that homepage all about those main service times. So that is your Sunday and weekend services, and just make sure you include it, because again, shocking how many people forget to include this on their website, or they make it very hard to find. This needs to be something that you find pretty early on the website. It needs to be kind of towards the top of the page, and so on. So anyways, I'll digress there because I think I've made my point. The next thing that we need to include, that's a good idea to feature rather on your homepage, is something about your latest sermons or series of sermons. So you could feature a graphic with a brief description about the sermon or the sermon series. A lot of times it's great to embed a link to the audio or the video of the latest sermon if you've got that available. A lot of people want to know what to expect, and we have spent time discussing this definitely before, but I have to park here for just a moment. People are not coming to church for the entertainment value. They're not coming to church just because they have nothing better to do. They're not coming looking for some type of attraction or some type of thing that maybe that culture could offer them somewhere else. No, people that come to church are there for spiritual reasons. By and large, there's very few people that walk through the doors of the church expecting to get anything else other than maybe some type of spiritual. They're searching, if you will, spiritually for something, and your sermon is going to provide that spiritual nurturing that people are looking for. And so I think we do ourselves a huge disservice when we don't make our upcoming sermon and sermon series or current sermon series a part of our promotion. And your website is a great place to showcase that. So your latest sermon series, find a place for that on your website. Next is the kids programs. This is something that you're going to want to showcase on your website. Now, again, we've said less is more. We're not talking about having a huge, massive paragraph or whatever. I think it is great to have a landing page dedicated to the kids as well. Maybe that's something that's more kid-themed. I think that's a good idea as well. But we're talking about on the website, you just want to mention something about your kids programs. Showcase your 12 and under kids programs, and be sure to clarify that you have childcare during your your services. I know that there some churches, for example, they may not be able to offer certain levels of childcare during all services. You want to be upfront about that on the website. You want to be honest. If you're unable, for example, you've got an early service and you don't offer childcare during that early Sunday morning service, be honest about that. Say, hey, no childcare provided here, but it is provided in the later service. That way people know how to plan. The last thing you want is people showing up expecting their kids to have a place to go and they don't. So you want to showcase the kids program, because one of the top reasons that families choose to attend church is in fact based on their kids programs. According to a Barna study, 58% of Christian parents choose a church with their kids in mind. So again, this is why we want to make a little featurette, a little plug about it somewhere on our homepage. So your kids programs, you want to feature that. Also, other things to keep in mind, it really depends on your demographic, on the culture of your community. For example, if you are a church that's in a big college town and you have some type of young adults ministry, might be good to feature that, your young adults or your student ministry there on your homepage as well. Definitely want to showcase what's there for 12 and under, but as far as going any older than that, that really depends on your demographic. Again, none of this should dominate your website or your homepage rather. It should just simply have a place that states and gives a little bit of information about those ministries. The next thing to include is a call to action. Your site should prompt visitors to take their next step. For someone who has never been to your church, you got to think about what this is. So let's think about this. You got somebody, here's always the way I like to paint it. People come to your website. And they see, what's the first thing they see? Well, the first thing they should see is a nice call to action section. They shouldn't see, I'm going to take a moment here to go on a small little rabbit. I'm just going to chase that rabbit right over there. They should not see a slider. I hate sliders. Sliders are the bane of website design. Sliders scream, this church was either designed in the 2000s or by somebody who can't get over the design of the 2000s. Church sliders, they usually kind of are messy in general, especially on mobile. I know a lot of them. They have these super cool animations, and I've seen them. They do all these little flips and rotations, and honestly, as somebody who has designed websites before, I can see how it's easy to get caught up in the coolness of it all. But the truth is that it can tend to create a lot of confusion and kind of chaos when they come to the site. So no sliders. If you've got a slider on your website, a rotating carousel, whatever you want to call it, get rid of it today. All right? Just pause right now, log into your website editor, get rid of that thing. What we're going to put in its place? Well, here is the ideal website header, if you will, the top banner, whatever you want to call it, that top section of your website. This is the section that is above the fold, if you will. When we talk about the newspapers, the newspapers, and they still use this term to this day, that's where we steal it from. When you get a newspaper, which I personally have not done very often, sorry, I'm a millennial. We don't use newspapers very often. But when you get a newspaper, it's often folded in half. If it's not rolled up, it's often folded in half. And there on that front fold reads the headline of the day, the main pictures, the main story, all of that stuff. And they're trying to hook you with what's above the fold, because in the newspaper world, that's what people are going to look up. If they like the headline, they'll pay for their copy of the paper and they'll go on and read it. Well, we've stolen that term and we started using the website, and we talk above the fold. And above the fold is simply anything that you see before you scroll down, whether that's on your desktop or on your phone. So let's talk about, so what we're talking about here is that above the fold header. First of all, it does not need to be a lot. I know some of you just thought, well, just like a newspaper, let's put as much information as possible above the fold. Absolutely not. And the biggest reason is because of mobile compatibility. What's clear on a desktop canvas, or what can fit, if you will, on a desktop canvas, can't fit also on a mobile phone. And so for that reason, and the other reason is just sheer clarity. We don't want to confuse people. The biggest mistake you can do is overcrowding any type of design canvas, whether it's digital or print. I know a lot of people, they think, well, I just want to give as much information as possible. I got this one chance to get all this information out, and they just want to they just want to pack it all in there. I get that, but you have to overcome that, and you have to realize less is more. You want to be simple, you want to be concise, you want to be clear. So in this case, on your website, what do you put there? What is at the top of your homepage? Well, we're going to talk about that in the next episode, but I want to encourage you of this. If you want to keep watching, if you don't want to if you don't want to have to wait until next week when we drop this next episode, you can continue this content now completely free. All you got to do is head over to churchmediahq.com/web. That's churchmediahq.com/web. And enter your information there, and we will send you a link to the full teaching here. No breaks. You don't have to wait week to week for the new content to be released. We got quite a bit more to cover, and we are going to be releasing that in upcoming episodes. But if you don't want to wait, you can still access this completely free, churchmediahq.com/web, and you can access the full teaching here. This full coaching session is available completely free. Just head over to churchmediahq.com/web. And for everybody else, I'll see you next week as we continue to talk about how you can improve your website. Now, for those of you who stuck around with me, welcome. Glad you're here. We were talking about, before we took that break there, and you joined me for the full training, we were talking about the call to action. And so let's get into that. So we've been talking about your website and all the different components that are essential. We've gone over a lot of content, and for sake of time, I'm not going to review it because you can go back and watch the previous content that we've put out about it. Where we left off was the call to action. Now, the call to action. We were talking about the top header, if you want to also call this the header, the top banner of your website. When someone comes to your website, the first thing you see, they should see not a slider. You already know how I feel about those. They shouldn't see. They really shouldn't even see multiple things. I've seen a lot of different ideas of what should be here, but the truth is, you really just need to have this one simple call to action section. And here's really how that should look. So again, this is where these nice images that you've taken come into play. You get a nice image as a background of this section, pictures of people smiling. I will say, I will make this quick note. If you want to include on this section something with a video background, that would be acceptable. However, before you implement a video background, make sure that you know how to format your video correctly so that it doesn't make your site load slowly, because that is something that is crucial. In fact, I didn't even mention it when we were talking about kind of global rules early on, but because again, I think it's something that goes without being said, but load time is huge. If your website doesn't load within just seconds of people trying to access it, many are just going to move on. And so the biggest hindrance to that can be a video background if it's not formatted correctly. And so if you know how to do that, go for the video background. I mean, I will tell you this, it needs to be short, about 30 seconds, no longer than 30 seconds of just a looping background. And there's all types of compression things you can do in video encoders to make it work. Too much technical stuff to go into now. If you want more help on that, reach out. We'd love to work with you and see what we can do to help you with that. But if you know what you're doing, go ahead, go for it. However, if not, then just use a nice image as your background. Now, what's on top of that background? Well, this is where we get into the call to action section. It's very simple. It's very straightforward. A statement that connects with the visitor. And the statement should follow this formula. We do this for you. Simple as that. We do blank for you. Now, it doesn't have to use that exact wording, but examples of this would be something like, we help you find hope. We help your family grow together. It really depends on your demographic, who you're trying to reach, who you're trying to maybe target. Again, your community, your local area there, as far as the demographics of community. But it needs to be something like that. It does not need to be something that is centric to your church. It doesn't need to say something to the effect of, our church has existed for 25 years. Okay, that's great. Or serving your community for 25 years. That's not as bad, but it's still not great. It's still not ideal. People don't care about how long your church has been around. On the surface, they really don't. Once they get more connected to you, they might. But at first impressions, that just does not matter to them. You also don't want to be presumptuous. You don't want to say that we are the church that loves its community. Well, I know that seems like such a small shift, but now that just became a statement of existence, a statement of being, a statement of identity. Now, your identity and who you are is really, really important to those on the inside. You need to have that defined, and that needs to be clear. And if the statement I just made about you are a church that loves and cares for its community is a core of your identity, great. However, that's not what needs to be communicated, because who you are is, of course, defined by what you do. And what you do is all that people care about, and specifically what you do for them. So you just answer that question. We do this for you. I gave you some examples. You can pull from those. But it needs to be something that is centric to the person that you are trying to reach. So we do this for you. You can have maybe one or two brief sentences underneath that headline to give some context to that, but it's certainly not required. And if you're going to wind up writing way too much text, or if you're going to wind up taking it back to being centric about your church and you can't really write it in such a way to keep the person you're trying to reach at the center of it, then don't bother. But you could optionally have that. Then you want to have two things. You want to have two what we call call to action buttons. A primary one on the left that seems to be more dominant, and a secondary one on the right that's not quite as obvious or as dominant. It's there, but the one on the left is more dominant. And this is what you make this button is something that you think of it this way. If I could convince someone who just came to my website for the first time, if I could convince them to do one thing to connect with our church, what would it be? And this could be a variety of things. Something that it used to be, maybe over a year ago, was, visit us, join us for worship, plan your visit. That would still be acceptable. Now we've seen a shift to this idea of church online being a more viable way of reaching people. So if you've chosen to maintain that approach, then maybe something more to the effect of connect with us, connect with us, or watch a service, join us online. Maybe that makes a little bit more sense for you to use it there. Again, it really comes down to what you believe that next step should be, or in this case, that first step for a person to connect with your church. And don't be afraid to tell them what to do. A call to action should be imperative. It should tell them what to do. It shouldn't be passive. It shouldn't be something like, learn more about us or about our church or whatever. It should be, no, join us, visit us online, watch a sermon, whatever it is. Be imperative, because people, at the end of the day, they have to, when they're told clearly what to do, they're more likely to do it. So that's the primary call to action. That number one thing, that's the first step. If I can get them to do anything to connect with our church, that would be it. Now, the secondary call to action, I look at it this way. That's where you might be a little bit more passive. That's where it's like, okay, well, I didn't convince you to do this, so let me tell you why you should. And this might be where you put something like, learn more about us, or connect with us. Again, that could be maybe interchangeable. I know I did suggest that for maybe the primary, but this actually might be the better place for that. Connect with us. something, like I said, a learn more button. It could be something really passive. Again, it's up to you, whatever you want it to be. But this is something that you are going to want to do and want to include. Again, if you can't get them to take the primary call to action, this is the button and this is the call to action that explains why they should. So this is your call to action section. It's the most important thing on your homepage. And it needs to be the first thing that people see is that call to action. Now, this is kind of a bonus point thing, and it has to do with contact capture. A contact capture incentivizes a potential visitor to share their name, email, and optionally their phone number on your website. So, going back to these calls to action, everything I just said is great if you do not have a contact capture. However, if you're able to develop a contact capture, a place where you can capture the name, email, and so on, then this would become your primary call to action. And your what was your primary call to action would become your secondary call to action. And we'll talk about why here in just a moment. But here is the way that you can capture this information. And here's why you should do it. Because once you have this information, you can follow up with them before they ever visit your church. Think of how many people are coming to your website. And think of how many people of those people are not coming to your church. Well, I mean, it's statistically, if you have a lot of web traffic, statistically could be pretty low, the actual amount of people who are actually attending your church that visit your website. Something much more simple for them to do rather than attend your church being the next step would be to give them your contact information. And you have to think of ways to incentivize that. Do not incentivize them by saying subscribe to our newsletter. Nobody wants to read your newsletter, or something like that. No, you have to come up with something that actually says, you know what, my email address, yes, it's something that commonly asked for. Anybody who does marketing asks for an email address because email is the most effective form of marketing. There are stats upon stats upon stats to prove that. It's more effective than social media. It's more effective than anything you can think of in terms of billboards or, print marketing or anything like that. Social media, email capture is the most effective way. So you have to figure out a way to incentivize people, and they are expecting, they might be half expecting someone to ask for their email address. So you have to offer them something of value that's kind of worth the trade. Okay, I will give you my email address, because what you have to offer is pretty good, not just, newsletter, okay, that's boring. You need to offer them something good. So here's a few ideas. First, if your church offers a gift for first-time guests, so for people that are first time to your church, you say, hey, we've got a gift for you, or whatever. Well, you know what you could do? One of the greatest things to do, and it really doesn't take much because you're already doing this, is you can just simply ask people to reserve their gift by entering their contact information. So here's how this might play out on your website. You say, hey, we help your family grow together. That's your headline. Okay, now in that subtext, instead of providing the context to your, to that statement, because that statement alone is probably sufficient, you can put something in the subtext and go, we've got a free gift for you if you connect with us. Reserve your gift today. On that main call to action becomes reserve your gift. They click it, name, email, they type it in, a message pops up that says, thank you for reserving your gift. We'll have it for you at so-and-so's location when you arrive to church. So this is a very simple way to just implement to implement one of these contact captures, is to say, oh yeah, reserve my gift. They click it, name and email, and boom. Now you've got their contact information. Now you can start to send them service reminders. Hey, don't forget, church is Sunday at such and such time. Hey, we're so excited. Thank you for visiting our website. We wanted to learn a little bit more about you. Let's connect. You could just start that assimilation process, that process of further getting them connected before they ever visit the church. And so you can do it through this reserve a gift. Another idea is to maybe prompt a visitor to plan their visit. This is not quite as effective, but it is possible. So it is something that if you've got nothing else, it's something that is doable. So plan their visit, and then you ask them for their name and email, and then a lot of times you just redirect to a page that says, hey, okay, here is what you can expect and whatnot. Again, not quite as effective, but it could work. Another thing is if you've got some type of resource that maybe you've developed. Maybe you've got something that like an ebook, something that now again, huge disclaimer, only things you have the right to distribute. Don't just take random people's ebooks. If it's something that maybe you've written or something that's original to you, whatever it may be. But something like that's maybe a digital offering, a digital download, something say, hey, we've got this free resource for you or for your family, whatever it may be. We want to give that to you. Click here, and then they enter their name and email, all that. Look, it doesn't really matter how you do it, but I think this is something that's being really missed by the church world. Businesses are doing it nonstop. Businesses that know how to market and know how to reach people for their purposes, they are using email marketing. Churches need to do this well. And I will say this, churches that are doing well tend to be using email marketing, and they tend to be trying to capture people's contact information early on. Now, all of this with a massive disclaimer. Do not, absolutely, for no reason, do not ask for too much information. You do not want them to feel overwhelmed. And this really goes for whether it's that digital connection section here with the name and email, this digital online contact capture, or if it's your in-person contact communication card that you ask for during service. I see this mistake all the time. This makes people, when they're asking for too much information, and it makes people feel overwhelmed, and it can even seem a little bit intrusive. I mean, you think about what you see on these connection cards. I mean, you're asking for kids' ages and names, and I mean, it could get really, really personal. And just because you put the statement or make the disclaimer that only share what you're comfortable with, doesn't mean that people are comfortable with you asking. And so, especially on the digital side of things, at a minimum, you want to ask for their email. At most, you want to ask for their name, email, and phone number. And the sweet spot is often just name and email. Not first name, last name, spouse name, kid's name, email. Not first name, last name, address, email. No, name and email. You say, but there's so much information I want to get from them. I understand that. But this is, if you've never heard the statement, it's just getting your foot in the door. You are just getting enough information to follow up, because a lot of times one of the follow-ups can be, hey, we'd love to know what you think about our church. Or here's another one I've seen. Hey, you visit our website. Tell us what you think about our website. We want your feedback. And then you start to collect more data about that person. As you ask for more feedback, you ask a little bit more information about them. Maybe that's where you ask them about their phone number or the extra piece of information you'd like to collect. Whatever it may be, that is reserved for later. At first impression, you need to be asking for nothing more than the name, email, and maybe the phone number. But I kind of regret even saying that, because I think that's getting a little bit too much. So you want to ask them for a name and an email. Never ask for for more information. Never come across as intrusive, because this can be a huge way that you just kind of turn people off and turn people away. So ask for their information, but only the name and email. And if you're able to implement one of these contact capture sections, you will find it to be a invaluable aspect of your website, because now you can connect with people before they ever set foot on your church campus. Now, the next thing that we're going to include on our homepage is our social connections. In this, we want to encourage people to connect with you on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and so on. So you've got 160 plus hours that exist within the week outside of your services and other church programs. Social is where we can connect with people on a daily basis. So you definitely want to include that somewhere on your homepage. Now, I'm not saying it needs to be super dominant. It needs to be a massive aspect of your website, but it is good to include it somewhere on your site. A lot of times, if we go back to that contact capture, after they submit a contact capture, they submit that form, you can have it direct to a section on your site that says, hey, thanks for connecting with us. Here, take the next step in connecting with us and follow us on social. But even if you don't do that, it's great to have it somewhere. I've seen social connections put somewhere, sometimes in the main menu, kind of in the side of the main menu. I've seen it in the footer menu, or I've seen it, somewhere along in kind of the middle of the homepage, kind of as its own dedicated section. It doesn't matter too well. Again, it doesn't need to be overly dominant and intrusive, but it is good to feature your social connections at some point on your homepage. Now, the next and the final thing to consider featuring on your homepage is special events. When it comes to special promotions, though, you only want to display the next big thing on your homepage. And you want to think of truly the next big thing. And we'll talk about what truly the next big thing could mean. Any special events featured on your homepage should have appeal to outsiders or be applicable to more than half of your church demographic. So that's what we mean by the next big thing. Just because you've got an event coming up on your calendar that's maybe for a smaller group of folks at your church doesn't mean that it needs to be the next big thing. It needs to be something that appeals to outsiders. So some activity I've seen before that I actually think is a great activity for people inside your church and people that are already connected is some type of church work day or service project day where, these volunteers come in and they help do things like clean up the property, pick up trash, pull weeds, maybe clean up the facilities. I think that's all great and good. But I remember going to a church website one time and that was featured as like a main event. Well, that's not going to have much appeal to anyone who's visiting for the first time. Remember, this all goes back to who we're trying to reach with our homepage, with our website, is we're trying to keep in mind that, hey, we only want to we want to design it for as if the only people visiting it are people who have visited for the first time. That has got to be the dominant paradigm as we go through and make our and design our website. So when it comes to special events, here are things that are kind of always acceptable. Easter, okay, Christmas, even Mother's Day. If you've got a new sermon series, that's a great thing to feature. Hey, we're starting a new sermon series. I think that is a fantastic thing. I've already talked about how I feel about sermon series and their effectiveness. Even some things like baptism, for example. Hey, we're going to be baptizing. We're going to have a baptism Sunday. That can be something that is appealing to outsiders because they may say, oh, yeah, I've never been baptized or whatever it may be. And so these are things that that are kind of always acceptable. Sometimes acceptable, maybe a special kids event. If it's a particularly large kids event that's designed for outreach, churches that do some type of kids camp or day camp or vacation Bible school or something like that. That could be something acceptable that you make a big deal of your homepage. And anything that you would say this event is outreach centric. It's designed to reach people outside the walls of our church. That's the kind of stuff that you want included. Stuff that's really never acceptable is things like small group Bible studies that, again, are only appealing to certain demographics and certain people in your church, subgroups, if you will. This isn't to say that you wouldn't want to ever feature your small groups program on your homepage, but it would be, hey, here's our small groups, not here is this particular men or women's or whatever Bible study. Unless you happen to be, and I know what you're saying. Well, men and women, that's 50% of our church. What we're talking about here is things that are, when we're not thinking about the gender aspect of it, things that appeal, it's really more about age groups. That has a much bigger dominant feature. So if you're reaching a lot of people that are maybe 55 or older, and that really does account for more than 55% of the people you're reaching, okay, then you might want to feature some type of special program for senior saints or whatever cheesy name you've come up with for your program there for that age group. Or likewise, if someone is reaching, or I should say, if someone is on the low end, I guess I should say, like I said, if you're in a college community or something like that, then you can reach those. You can advertise events that are designed to reach those people. So when it comes to those special events, you want to be very selective in what you include on your homepage. You want to make sure that it's outreach centric and that it's about the people that are visiting. And another note, it needs to be something that makes sense, something that appeals to the visitor. For example, I've seen this before, and some people really do, and I think it's fewer and fewer, but I have seen some church leaders, they're opposed to, they don't like calling Easter Easter because it's got some type of non-Christian origin in that actual name. And whether that's true or not, they want to use the term Resurrection Sunday. And hey, look, my perspective, I would actually rather it be called that too if I could make it all about what I want, because yeah, sure, that's a little bit more clear as to what it's about from a faith-based standpoint. However, Easter is what it's called. That's what culture calls it. That's what they know it as. And so featuring Resurrection Sunday on your website is going to be a little bit confusing to people, and they're going to think, what is that? Believe it or not, there are people who really, they don't realize the correlation. And if you're reaching unchurched people, that shouldn't be such a bad thing, because you're going to take them and you're going to teach them the truth. So that's just an example of, you want to feature events that you that do appeal to a visitor, to someone who's connecting with your church for the first time, and you want to use terminology that is simple. Just call it Easter. Just call it Christmas. Don't try to get too creative and too out of the box when it comes to these things, because at the end of the day, clarity is going to be king in these situations. So that's the homepage. We spent a lot of time there because the truth about the website is that 95% of people are never going to navigate away from that homepage. So we're going to put our most time, energy, and effort. However, there are some secondary pages that are also included in this, or that should also be included on your website. And we're going to talk about that more here in the next episode. But again, if you want to go ahead and get early access to this content, you can get it completely free. You don't have to wait until next week as we continue to discuss this. Simply head over to churchmediahq.com/web. That's churchmediahq.com/web, where you can access the rest of this coaching content completely free. The secondary pages to be considered when adding to a website. These are pages that you can make a part of your website that go beyond your homepage, that some people are going to care about, because a lot of times your homepage main sections would actually link to these pages. So we talked about a children's ministry section on your homepage, maybe a small tile or icon or whatever that talks about your kids' ministry with a very short description. Well, if people click on that, then it could take them to a kids ministry page, which would be a great example of a secondary page to include. So that would be the first type of content that would make a secondary page, is ministry specific pages. Now, I will say this. Again, you have to consider what is most important when it comes to your demographic, when it comes to your local area and your community, as far as what's going to have the most appeal. Kids ministry, it's pretty general. Most parents are going to want to know that, hey, you've got something for their kids, and they're going to want to read more about it. So maybe a dedicated landing page would make sense for that. And then again, I keep using this example. If you're in a town that you've got some type of a young adults outreach because you're in a college community, well, it might make sense to have a dedicated landing page for your young adults ministry in that case. However, don't feel like every ministry needs a dedicated page. It really comes down to what your church is doing specifically, and so don't feel like you've got to do a dedicated page for every little ministry and aspect of your church, because that can get pretty overwhelming. And the sad truth is that a lot of times when you do all that, you're making pages that in all reality are rarely, if ever, going to get visited. So in addition to these actual different, ministry pages that might make sense based on your church specifically, here are some other pages that I think just across the board would actually make sense to have. So the first is your Connect page. And this is something that might sound a little bit new, But this is where you're going to put all of your small groups, your Bible studies, your classes, even upcoming events and activities, age-specific programs. A lot of times this is primarily content and events and groups that are for adults. And here's where you can, a small paradigm shift can really help you understand and organize your ministries in general. So on the back end, if you will, on the administrative side, what you're seeing as a leader at your church is all the complexity of all the different things that you offer, all the different kids classes and all the different, adult small groups, or all the different Bible studies, all the different service opportunities, all these different things. They can be really, really complex. The goal, though, is not to make it seem that you want to make it, we want to make it seem simple to the person who's visiting your website or who's coming in from the outside. I have seen some churches that they might somewhat like to, they kind of are under the perception that, well, if we show that we have a lot of ministries, a lot of opportunities, and whatever, that this can be something that's actually appealing. And while I do think it's good that your church showcases that it might have, again, these multiple connection opportunities for different age groups and demographics, you don't want to be overwhelming. You want to simplify it as much as possible. I think the Connect page really solves this problem and really helps you simplify your potentially complex ministries, programs, and offerings there at your church. So this is, when it comes to the Connect page, this is how you can do it. You put all these small groups. Think about this. Really, just about everything is a group. Whether you call it a small group or not, whether you call it a group or not, it is a group. Even if it's, because a lot of times small groups are thought of as these, well, they're these groups of that people, maybe they meet on-site or off-site, but they meet weekly. And it's a specifically organized thing that we call our small group, or maybe you call it your adult classes ministry, whatever terminology you're using. And that's what we think of that fits in there. But the truth is that even if you have an annual church picnic that you have once a year, well, that's another example of a group, because what is a group? What are all of these things? Well, all they are is taking your larger congregation, those who attend your church on Sunday or on the weekend, and you're dividing it up into smaller segments, smaller groups, so that you can more effectively connect with those people and help them grow. And that is the beauty of a groups model. And the Connect page is that it recognizes that everything is really a group. I would even go as far as to argue that extra services throughout the week that you might offer, such as a midweek service or some type of Sunday night Bible study, I would even argue that those can classify as groups. Yes, they might be larger groups, but they're still a subgroup of your church, because I highly doubt that near as many people attend those extra services that do your main Sunday service. That's typically the pattern that we see in most churches that offer those secondary services. And so I think that everything, I believe you'll find some benefit in showing everything as a connection opportunity on this page. Everything is a group. Everything is just a connection opportunity, and that's what this Connect page is for. Now, here's a warning. You want to be cautious of how this page is presented. Again, too much info presented in the wrong format can confuse visitors. You don't want to present something that's incredibly overwhelming. Again, you don't want to just list every single thing. I've seen churches that, they've got a nice, the way that they present their connection opportunities is, they have some type of a filter, at the top of the page where you select or maybe before you can even access the page, you have to, complete this quick little form of basically your age and, if you have kids or not, if you're married or not, all these different factors. And then once you submit that, then it only shows them the groups that are applicable to them and the connection opportunities that are for them. You don't want to be overwhelming with this. And here is something you can do kind of for bonus points. You can provide online sign-up forms for all these different connection opportunities. If you can do that, then again, it kind of goes back to this contact capture idea. Well, now, I'm not saying if you're able to, if it's something that's a paid event and you're able to get people to pay online, that's one thing. I'm not necessarily talking about that. I'm talking about just getting people to sign up and more or less RSVP for an event or for a group or whatever it may be by just giving their name and email again. That way, hey, now you've got their info, you see that they're interested, and now you can begin that process of getting them fully engaged and connected through that particular group or opportunity. So the Connect page, this is something that I really think can make a difference in your church. It can be a great way to present all the different opportunities that you have. So I would definitely highly consider adding that to your website. Another page would be your next steps and maybe even your serving page. So giving people a clear path to how they can take their next steps at your church and get involved with serving at your church. This is going to be really important because you want people to know exactly what their next steps are. If they want to continue to get deeper, get more involved, get deeper, get connected on a deeper level, this is what you want to make that path clear. You don't want to make it confusing. You don't want to leave it up for question. You want to make it very, very clear. Ideally, you want to include, again, an online form that allows someone to take the next step. You're going to find here that these online forms are key to getting people to go from just a visitor to someone who actually is now connected and engaged. And so giving them this form where they can say, hey, this is the next step I want to take. I want to accept Christ. I want to get baptized. I want to start serving. I want to, I'm interested in, church membership or whatever it may be. You can have these different things. Again, this kind of is similar to a connection or communication card that you would physically give out at your church, just digital. So this is something that I highly encourage you to consider adding. And if you are looking for that resource, right here on our landing page, churchmediahq.com/web, we actually have access to a way where you can implement this on your church website free. We handle most of the heavy lifting in terms of all the back-end coding and everything. We basically just provide this form for you so that you can use it at your church. So if you're interested in taking advantage of that, again, it's a free resource. So if you're interested in taking advantage of that, again, it's a free resource available at churchmediahq.com/web. So your next steps in serving, it's great to have that online connection form if possible. You just want to give people that clear path. The next page or section you can include is something about your beliefs and or your core values. Now, many people will want to know, and I will say this, a lot of this, again, depends on your local area. So I think of the classic, if your church is in the South or if it's not. So Southern churches tend to be a little bit more saturated with church in general and with the gospel message. Now, I'm in the South. Side note, biggest myth is that everybody in the South is good Christian people. I tend to think everybody in the South is good people. Most people are, but the whole, just because in your South you're growing, Jesus, not so much, but I digress. That's a total soapbox there for another time. However, nonetheless, people are more familiar with the idea of church, the concept of church attendance. And what you tend to see in the South is a lot of church hopping. And I'm not saying that from a negative standpoint in that, yes, occasionally you'll get your disgruntled church member who leaves this church and begins to go into this church across the street. Sure, that kind of stuff happens. But you'll even get churches, or you get people rather, that they relocate. Maybe they stay, maybe they relocate to be a couple hours or an hour. Sometimes, they just relocate and they go, across town to where it becomes kind of inconvenient to travel to the church they were going to. So they start looking for new churches. Well, a lot of times, if you are already churched, if you will, and you already have kind of begun that faith journey and you're maybe even somewhat rooted in what you believe and so on and so forth, then you're going to be looking for a church that has similar beliefs and core values as maybe what that person has adopted and what they have adopted to believe. And so what I'm saying here is that this beliefs and core values section, it's really valuable and it serves a great purpose regardless, but I do recognize that it could be a little bit more important depending on your local community and the culture of your part of the world. But all that aside, I think the best way to summarize your beliefs and your core values is really in no more than maybe 10 simple statements that just give people the headlines. I'm not a fan of people including full statements of faith, that have cross references and lengthy exposition about each and every one. And most people, they just need the headlines. They just need to know your basic theology. They need to notice, things like, hey, your core values, what's important to you, what's your mission, and I'm not going to try to tell you how to develop your theology. You have to determine, obviously, what's important to you. If you really are set on providing a full statement of faith, maybe make it a non-dominant link to some type of downloadable PDF if you really do believe that's something people are going to be searching for more. But for the actual website content, just keep it really general and a really overview. Again, less is more. We don't want to get too involved in our descriptions of anything on our website. So your beliefs and core values. We already talked about these different ministry pages. I do think something, though, I will come back to this. I do think something about next generation ministry is really important to feature. So whether that's a kids page or even a student ministries page for those who are, in high school, teenagers, and then, like I said, if you've got a strong young adults ministry, that might be something to feature. But you're definitely going to want to say something about it. And I think if it's particularly for kids ministry, it's great to have that landing page. So won't spend too much time rehashing that. And then the other section, another section or page to consider is your church leadership. And this can include names, photos, and very brief bios of the key leadership at your church. So obviously your lead pastor. If you, again, going back to that next generation ministry, your kids pastor, maybe your youth or student pastor, maybe your worship leader, because what we're trying to do is before people visit, we're trying to familiarize them with the faces that they can expect to interact with. So the kids, they will see this kids pastor. Obviously, the adults are going to see the lead pastor as he's preaching or teaching. The worship pastor, again, that's somebody who's probably going to have a dominant part of the service. So these are the things that you want to include. Now, I will say this, don't take this too far, including people like your support staff, volunteers, deacons, elders. Again, then we start to get in this information overload. As far as a number of people to include, again, it can be hard to say, but I mean, as little as really, if it's just the senior pastor, because that's all you got, obviously that is sufficient. But I would say six or seven, maybe 8 if you're pushing it. You don't want to have too many. I think the less is more philosophy is best here. And then another kind of bonus project here, if you're able to include photos of your leadership that also has their spouses and their kids if they have them, this is going to really make your leadership team seem a lot more relatable. Again, just a quick picture. It's probably understood that they've got some type of family, but showing it on the website, if everybody's comfortable with that, can really just make a subtle subliminal connection with the website visitor before they ever visit your church. And so, again, this is a good reason to include these photos of families or with spouses, and not just the leadership themselves. So that's the church leadership page. Now, the next is going to be online giving. Now, I'm not going to go over this too much because I think it's become very obvious that churches that offer online giving tend to have higher giving averages. Tithely is a really, in fact, that's my kind of recommended. If you haven't started with online giving yet, check out Tithely because they have options where there's no monthly rates. And so you could look into that. They have some really good research and infographics about this if you want to go to their website. But the statistic that really stood out to me is that over 2/3 of giving is done through, or is rather done on days other than Sunday. So over 2/3 of giving happens on the other 6 days of the week when online giving is offered. So this just shows you that people don't have to be sitting under the sound of your voice and being prompted to give just by visiting your website and seeing that you offer online giving can be enough to prompt them to give a contribution and do and give to your church. But all that said, I have to make this massive disclaimer, huge warning here. Do not make this a dominant aspect of your website. Calling back to those calls of action we were talking about, never ever should your call to action be give now, give online. Nope, that should not be your dominant call to action. That is, again, it's one of those things I feel like should go without saying, but that is going to be just turn away so many people. People are going to think, oh, okay, this church, okay, all they care about is my money. They just want me to give. All right, whatever. That should be nowhere on the dominant part of your website. It doesn't need to be the primary call to action, nor the secondary call to action, nor should you try to slip it in there as a third call to action. Third call to action is a bad idea anyways. No online giving as part of the call to action section, or even should it serve a dominant role on the homepage. Now, I do understand giving's important. I get that. So I'm not saying to get it off your website altogether. I think it's fine if it's included in the main menu of your homepage. And because in theory, then it can still be seen above the fold before you scroll. It's not that people are offended that you need giving to exist. They understand that. They just don't want to feel like the first thing on their website is you prompting them and begging for their money. Believe it or not, this is how people can perceive that. So you want to be really careful for that. And if you haven't implemented online giving yet, you need to do this. And you need to do it soon. I think most churches at this point have done it because the value has become more obvious than ever. And it does need to have a place on your website, but it does not need to be the dominant thing. Either way, online giving, you need to go for it. And again, check out Tithely, because you can, we don't get any type of endorsement from them or any type of kickback or anything. This isn't some type of paid endorsement. Just from what I've seen, it's a great way to get started without having with no startup costs. So look into that. Now, the next section or page on your website is going to be your sermon media page, and this is obviously where we make past sermons available to watch or listen to in as many formats as possible. Now, I want to be clear. I'm not necessarily talking about a big, sermon portal. I've seen these, and churches that do these right, they look really nice, and I've seen third parties that offer this for churches. So I'm not saying that they're wrong, but I'm not saying that they're essential either. So what I'm talking about is a place where you can go and you can filter all the different sermons by, the speaker, the date, the series title, whatever. And again, all that is really cool and really good. And if you're able to do it right, then go for it. But it's one of those things, if you're can't do it right, or if you're just going to try to, the worst thing you can do is try to do something like that that's maybe has to be very manually managed. And what I mean by that is something that might require a lot of programming or coding, because a lot of times, like I said, if you're not using one of these third-party services that does it for you, it can look really, or it can take a lot of actually coding and technical knowledge and all that. So what we're talking about, though, more here is a place where you say, hey, our sermons are available online. And if all you're doing is embedding YouTube, the great thing about YouTube is you can embed a playlist. And, so for example, a playlist that you always have the latest sermon as the latest item in that playlist. Well, then there on your website, you'll always have the latest sermon preached will be available in this section. And then if people even have to click on a YouTube link and outlink to your, or link out to your YouTube channel to view the back catalog of all the sermons that you offer, I actually don't think that's such a bad thing, because then you're getting the opportunity to get YouTube subscribers, people subscribing to your channel and yet connecting to your church in just one more way. So I'm not opposed to that. When it comes to your sermon media, though, it needs to be available on as many platforms as possible. I said YouTube and then also Facebook. These are the main two as far as video content. All churches should be utilizing these platforms because they are free and they have billions of users. Now, I do know there has been concern lately about censorship, and Facebook and YouTube both have started to seemingly silence maybe some more conservative voices. And I'm sure there are isolated cases where maybe it's happened with churches. I'm not seeing this as a widespread thing, and I'm sure the day may come when it's more of an issue, but even more a reason to take advantage of using it now while we can. It's free. Again, it's free, and it doesn't take much effort to take advantage of it. So YouTube and Facebook, you need to be on these platforms. Now, another platform that you need to be on is through an audio podcast, because the podcast medium is exploding. According to Podcast Insights, it's a website that obviously takes a lot of stats and data about podcasts. 55% of the U.S. population listens to podcasts. That number is up from just over 50% 2 years ago. So what we're seeing is growth in podcast consumption. And I honestly don't believe it's going to peak anytime soon. The trends are just showing that this is going to become more and more and more. Audio consumption is becoming a huge dominant part of our media culture, which I, as a side note, think is fantastic because there is so much more room for different voices and opinions and outlets through the audio medium. So I think it's an awesome thing to see. And of these, a couple other stats though, 80% of people, they tend to listen to all or most of an episode. Okay, so in other words, 80% of people, when they start an episode, they're going to actually finish the majority of the content. And another 80% listen to an average of about 7 shows a week. And typically shows are about an hour long. So let's say about 7 hours of content a week. So a lot of people will potentially listen to preaching by way of podcast. And I would dare say that people are much more likely to actually listen than they are to just watch. I mean, think about all the things that you can do while you're listening that you can't do while you're watching. You can't safely watch a YouTube video while you're driving. It can be distracting to try to watch a video while you're working. It can be pretty difficult, if nothing else, to try to watch a sermon while you're exercising or working out or whatever it may be. So, but you can, all of those things I just mentioned, you can listen to a podcast while you're doing it and not miss a beat. So this is another reason why you need to be on podcasting. If you haven't gotten on it yet, you need to. And here's the biggest myth about podcasting, about particularly getting your sermons on podcast, is that it is expensive. And that it's difficult to do. And the truth is that you can do it for free and you can do it very easily through what I recommend, because it's the only one out there that I'm seeing like this that offers this truly free, and that's Anchor.fm. Anchor.fm actually was recently acquired by Spotify, which is one of the biggest podcast and audio platforms out there. And so they're kind of calling the shots now, but even I've been with Anchor. That's what we use for all of our podcasts here. I've been with Anchor since before the Spotify acquisition, and now a few months after. Everything seems to be, everything was seamless transition-wise. Nothing really changed. If anything, Spotify's just come along and made it a little bit better. And so Anchor FM, it's not designed for sermons specifically, but it has some really powerful features, and it's really easy to use. Setting it up is very simple. Uploading your sermons and content is really simple. And I'm going to throw this out there too. When it comes to your audio podcast, I would challenge you to start with your sermons. Start by adding your sermons because this is something that obviously it's content you're producing every week, so it shouldn't be much more of a challenge to get it out there. So start with some of your sermons. However, consider adding supplemental content throughout the week. So, for example, sitting down and having a conversation just between your pastor and maybe another one of your ministry leaders or volunteers, that type of insight where you just are having more of a conversational format, you're just having a back and forth, discussion. Now what you've got is dialogue content, not just monologue content. Monologue content is kind of what I've been doing now here for the vast, for a little while now as we've gone over this coaching content. It's just me talking to you via video. I'm not able to get your feedback. I'm not able to get your thoughts. I do enjoy doing this, but what I really love doing is having these conversations. And that's actually compiled much of the Church Media HQ content over the past few months is conversations that we're having with other church leaders and creative experts. I'm not sure what you prefer. In fact, side note, I'd love to hear your feedback. So let me know what you think, maybe in the comments or by shooting me an email. But people tend to, if nothing else, like at least a variety of both. They don't necessarily constantly want to feel like they're just being monologued, but they also may enjoy having some of that dialogue conversation. Because here's the thing, people that listen to conversations actually start to believe that they're actually a part of that conversation. It's this interesting mental dynamic that happens there. And so I would take it a step further. Don't just, yes, always start with what you can do. At the same, as I'm encouraging you to try this, I also don't want you to think that I don't want you to be overwhelmed. In other words, I don't want you to feel like, oh, it's so much work. I don't have the microphone. I don't have the camera. Look, we could talk. I don't want to dive too much into the technical side of things. But again, even on the technical side, starting a podcast is actually easy if you do want to develop that supplemental content. But your audio podcast can be a huge way to continue to reach people, to grow people, not just through your weekly sermons, but through potentially supplemental content. Now, getting back to Anchor. Again, very easy to use. You can upload your audio, give it a title, give it a description, and you can release it immediately, or you can schedule it to release later. So if you don't want your sermons, maybe you upload your Sunday sermons on Sunday afternoon, but you don't want them releasing till Monday morning, you can just schedule it and Anchor will take care of it. The greatest thing about Anchor, though, is when you sign up and once you've started to put content out onto Anchor, it is going to automatically distribute your content to all of the major podcasting platforms. So Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and then also several of these other, smaller platforms like Overcast and Stitcher and these others. It's going to take care of distributing it for you every single time you put out an episode. So you don't have to worry about making sure that your content gets to all the different platforms. So you can upload it to one place and then it can blast it out to all of the different ways, because there are a lot of apps and a lot of different ways to consume podcast content. So again, I cannot encourage you enough. If you have not started a podcast for your church, even if all you're doing is starting out at first with just your weekly sermons, get on to anchor.fm now, start a free account. Again, I get no type of kickback or any type of affiliate, nothing. This is not some type of official endorsement as far as a paid endorsement. This is just because it's that good, and I believe that it is going to really help your church as you dive into podcasting. So this kind of concludes the section about secondary pages. So these are pages that you can have on your website that aren't as important as the homepage. However, they are something that is valuable, that could provide value, I should say, to potential website visitors. Now let's talk about what I call the less effective pages. These are common church website pages that actually, in most cases, provide little value to the website visitor. If they're included on your site, they need to be included in a less obvious location. I like to put them in a place that I like to call the junk drawer, which is that footer menu at the very bottom of your website. And so here's a few that I think fit that mold. They're less important. They shouldn't be there. Some of you may not like what I have to say here, but hey, who cares? Church history. While this is going to become more valuable to someone, the more connected they get with your church, people new to your church or website, they really don't care how old your church is and how many pastors it's had or how it started. And so while having a church history page isn't completely off limits, it is something that you want to, if you add it, you want to make it something that you just minimize. You don't make a huge deal of it. It's a great candidate for that lower, if you will, that footer menu, that junk drawer. And I personally wouldn't put a lot of effort into the development of your church history page. Maybe just a couple of if this might be where you do have a couple paragraphs, just kind of with the story of your church, and that's kind of it. The next thing, the statement of faith. Yeah, I kind of already touched on this, but I think it's worth mentioning again. Just stick to your core values and beliefs. Avoid the doctrinal dissertation. If you can't let this go, then again, if you want to include that full statement of faith, then yeah, just a small PDF link download, or maybe you just say, hey, if you want it, you can request it. It can be something that people request from you, and you send it to them when they ask for it. The next thing, and this is where it's going to really get into some controversy if we haven't yet, the calendar of events. So you say, well, wait, what? Calendar of events? This is usually a big part of church websites. I know. I've designed websites for churches that have asked me to make this a dominant part of their website. Okay, and in that case, sure. I mean, I let you know what I think, but I'm gonna, I do what they say. But when it comes to the calendar events, the vast majority of people, whether they are new or already connected with your church, are only concerned with the next few events. So including a calendar in your website is actually sharing too much information. It's best to consolidate these upcoming events to your Connect page. Calling back to that Connect page, and only display the next 5 to 6 calendar items that are happening. And then depending on the size and programming of your church, only the next 4 to 6 weeks of events really need to be included. Now, I know, again, a controversial statement here, talking about how we need to get rid of the events calendar on your page. Now, I don't think if you still want to have it, kind of like that statement of faith, kind of, like the church history, this is something that you're going to include on this bottom footer menu. Okay, so a calendar of events, or a link to a calendar. And I wouldn't put much effort into this. In fact, if you're just using Google Calendar or Outlook or something like that as your calendar, just link directly to the public version of those pages. Yeah, those pages aren't always very pretty, but again, the idea is that this is not a big driving force for your website and for people visiting your website. It's just not. It's only going to be for people who are, again, for people who are already connected with your church and might want to look at a calendar. So here, I just want to emphasize this, though. The next 4 to 6 weeks is probably all that matters. This is a study, and it was done in relation to like family vacations. But I think it's very applicable to churches, because the truth is that a vacation's a lot. Okay, so I mean, you've got to plan, you got to potentially book flights and hotels, and obviously there's a lot of cost to that. I mean, there's a lot of planning that goes into it. A lot more than just simply planning to go to a church event. I mean, there's a lot of, like I said, logistics, if you will, involved with that. So I think the principle remains the same. A study found that 60% of Americans, they only plan for what they consider must-do events. So this might be, for some it might be obviously work-related engagements. There maybe dentist appointments, doctor's appointments. If they got kids soccer games, these things that, hey, they think they're important, they can't miss. And then 48%, so just under half of employees plan their vacations less than 6 weeks out. And that what we're talking about, that's the high end of it. The other 52%, most of them are doing it less than that. Only 48% are actually planning their vacations that are in that less than 6 weeks out, 6 weeks out or more. Totally butchered that stat there, but I think you get the point. So what we're seeing then is that only half of people are truly doing some type of advanced planning for things such as high level, if you will, and that requires much attention and finance and planning as a vacation. And so that gives us a pretty good idea that people aren't planning ahead super far when it comes to their church attendance, if they're going to attend a particular church event. So all of this to say, you don't need to feel like you need to include the whole next year or even the next 6 months. The next 4 to 6 weeks being featured on that. And again, in the Connect page of your website is the perfect place to do this, is featuring it there. And again, if you really, really feel like you got to include that calendar, make it a link. That's what this beautiful footer menu is for, to throw all the junk that doesn't matter to most people. The next thing is coming back to talking about ministries a little bit. Now, we have talked about particular ministries like kids ministry and potentially student ministry, young adult ministry, that might need to have its own dedicated landing page. But dedicating a page or multiple pages to showcase your ministry isn't always the best way to present these connection opportunities. Like we said before, a lot of times for these smaller ministries or whatever, things that aren't particularly related to maybe kids or students, those can tend to be there are pages that it's like, well, we put some work in developing them and designing them, and well, they're not getting visited very often because they just don't hold a lot of value for most people. So again, this comes back to the Connect page. It should effectively present these ministries that people may want to get involved with, and then also on the next steps and serving page, this is going to give them the chance to inquire about serving in a ministry. I can't emphasize this Connect page enough because the conventional way has been, well, we're going to have a page for events. We're going to have a page for ministries. We're going to have a page for, another page that's dedicated to maybe, like I said, events and ministries and maybe signups or something like that. I mean, I've seen these things broken up into 3, 4, and 5 different pages, and Connect page consolidates it all into one location. So that way, when people are looking for how to get involved, because really all that stuff we mentioned, events, activities, groups, that's the other page that's often there, a dedicated small groups page, small groups, events, ministries, all this is really just a way for people to get connected. And so having it there on that Connect page gives people one common hub that they can go to and that they can find the way to get further connected. Now, this is moving on to a section about bells and whistles. Bells and whistles, these are features that are only effective when they are done with excellence. You can't take shortcuts with these. And unfortunately, they also require a good bit of talent, time, and resource to do if you do want to do it with excellence and make them effective. I'm going to start that over because I need a drink. Now, the next section to discuss is bells and whistles. These are website features that are only effective when they are done with excellence. And unfortunately, if you're going to do them, it's going to require a good bit of talent, time, resource, if you do want to do them the right way. And so that's why you need to understand the commitment required to these features before you implement them. The first is a blog. Now, there's really no additional cost or technical knowledge involved with a blog. Most website platforms out there offer blogging as just some type of feature. In fact, if you're using WordPress, which is probably the most common CMS out there, if you're kind of doing it yourself, they originally are a blogging platform. So that's still a huge part of what they do. But it's not about the technical side of it. Blogging the right way requires time, planning, and content development. You don't need to start a blog if you're not committed to regularly posting quality content. I firmly believe that having no blog is better than having a blog that's been dormant or one that's just posting fluff. And I've seen both. I've seen people start blogs and they're really good about it for the first few weeks, and then it just kind of dies. And then I've seen people, I'm even thinking of somewhat popular blogs out there that honestly, to me, they seem like a bunch of fluff. It seems like something that the blogger feels that they have to keep up with because it's something they committed to, and so they're just putting up a bunch of content just for sake of having content. I do believe that you can find quality in the quantity, but again, it's just finding this right balance of getting content out there that provides people value. And particularly if you're blogging about content relevant to your church and to the spiritual needs of people, you definitely want to keep that something that's less fluff. Here's my advice to people that want to start really not just a blog, but any type of outlet that's going to produce regular content. We've had a podcast now for over 3 years, putting out and then managing a YouTube channel on top of that for about 2 years. And so putting out regular content is part of what I do. I'm not a big blogger, but I do put out content by way of audio podcast and video weekly. And so I've had people ask me, well, hey, what would you do to start this content outlet? And my advice is always the same. First is this. Do not start something. Do not release, if you will, your first episode or your first blog post until you have already written or developed or recorded the next 3. So, in other words, never drop that first episode. Never post that first blog post until you've got the subsequent 3 or more that come after it already developed. You say, oh man, that seems like a big time commitment and a big commitment. Yeah, because it's going to help you understand as you start out the commitment that's going to be required if you're going to maintain and upkeep this. So as always, my advice. And then even after you get past those initial, 3 episodes, I say never post your content until you at least know and have planned what you're doing for the following 30 days. That is so important, and it's going to make sure that you can keep up that content. Now, you're preaching a sermon, well, obviously you know that, hey, I'm going to have a sermon pretty much every week. And so you can keep up that type of a podcast. But if you're going to add this supplemental content, and I talked about the supplemental content adding the podcast, I really encourage you to do that. Maybe add that as a part of your church's podcast, but don't go into it just making it up as you go, flying by the seat of your pants. Have a plan. And again, have those next 30 days. And I really encourage you, those first 3 or so pieces of content ready to go when you go to drop your very first episode, or in this case, blog post. The other thing that I advise is if you're looking to start and it feels overwhelming, understand that while you don't have to drop a daily content, and there are daily bloggers, there's daily podcasts out there that are dropping new episodes every day, new content every day. That's a huge commitment. So while you don't have to do something daily or even weekly, you have to at least do something monthly. And I think that's a great place to start. That's where this podcast started. We started doing just monthly episodes, and after a few months, it grew to twice a month, and then once a week, and now twice a week. And so you're going to find that the more you get in a rhythm and in a groove, if you will, of how to do it, you're able to produce more content. But starting at once a month, I think is great. And think about this. If you just sit down and you write, because there's a lot of stages of content development in general, whether it's blogging or, again, podcasting, whatever it may be. You have to develop/write the content. You have to produce the content. In this case, record the content with a podcast. If it's written only, well, you have to go through and edit it and make sure it's all pretty and good and presentable for your website. And then there's actual publishing. So there's these different stages. And think about this, like with written content. If you can just find, maybe take a morning, maybe it doesn't even take that long, but maybe just take like half a day and just write up whatever your thought is, whatever blog content you've got on your mind, write it up. And then think about this. What you might find is that, well, hey, this doesn't have to be all one blog post. I can take this and I can release it over the course of the next few weeks or months. I can divide it up. Well, then all of your content development is done. So that's the next recommendation. It's batching. You want to batch that content. You can find it because it's a lot easier to dedicate maybe 1 day a month to develop content. And then if you're doing a monthly podcast, or a monthly blog, well, then you can develop that content and then you can start to push it out. If it's once a month, oh man, you could get ahead for 6 months. Batching is huge. That's how I've recorded the episodes you're watching right now. I sat down this particular afternoon, and I just recorded all of the content. Now, for those of you who have gone and accessed the full teaching, great, and you've enjoyed it in full, and you're kind of able to listen to it on demand. And then for those of you who have not done that, then we've just released this as different episodes over the past few weeks. And that is the best way to develop content and to release content that requires regular commitment, and a blog is one of those. So bells and whistles, a blog. The next is live stream. Now, we've done full episodes, series of episodes about live stream. And so I don't want to dive into this too deep, but it is worth mentioning. Very few churches are doing true live stream with excellence. But live streaming, now more than ever, has been made really easy to do through many social media platforms. So Facebook actually does, YouTube actually does. They make it really easy to live stream. And so because of that, churches are using these platforms to live stream. But here is the truth about live stream. It's not benefiting your church nearly as much as you think. In fact, it could actually be making a bad impression on those outside of your church. There's too much, again, to explore here. And again, we've got past episodes we've done about our philosophy on church online. But here's the main thought here. Presenting a quality live stream of your service requires significant investment in cameras and equipment, as well as resources like internet bandwidth. Doing it the right way is not as simple as just pressing go live in your Facebook app. High Blue, they're a European business that specializes in streaming services. They estimate that a professional live stream setup can cost no less to do it right than $7,000. Now, there's a lot of different shortcuts and things and ways, and I have seen things, but this is a company that does it professionally. Say, if you want to do it in the right way, that it's actually going to make a good impression, then $7,000 is what you can expect to spend. So here's my recommendation. The first, you focus first on audio. Again, audio is really up and coming when you think of the podcast, people who are listening to podcasts. And it's very feasible to produce a quality audio recording of your sermon and distribute them on your website and podcasting platforms. Recording audio, you're very likely already set up to do that if you've got any type of PA system at your church. So just recording that audio files are much smaller than video files. So taking that and uploading that to a platform like Anchor and distributing it there is great, because that quality audio is so important. And it is so important to the point to where if it's all you have, then you're better off than having some type of quality video with bad audio or vice versa. Quality audio is king here when it comes to the production. That's why we focus so much on audio here. We've got this microphone right here in my face, and I've got a backup microphone there. And this is something that is, because it's so important to get that quality audio. So focus first on audio. Now, after you've mastered audio, you've got consistently good sounding audio. Now you can consider investing into a basic camera setup for recording only. So we're going to record and then we're going to upload afterwards. If you want, you can use the Premiere feature of YouTube, Facebook, that they both offer a similar feature that creates a live broadcast experience, but you're not actually live streaming. I've also talked about the Church Online platform before. This is something that's completely free to use, developed by the team at Life Church. You can access it at online.church. It's a completely free platform that allows you to do simulated live services. It's really great. I won't go into all the details of it there, but what I'm saying is it's possible to make pre-recorded content seem live, and that needs to take priority before you actually do go live. So if you do get to the point, though, where you've learned to do the audio and the video recording with excellence, consistency, then and only then do you really need to move into live streaming your services. But I will say this, you might find that uploading the recorded video of your service is going to be, and doing some type of simulated live experience is going to be more than sufficient for what you need. And so I highly encourage you to look into taking these appropriate steps, audio first, then video, then going live with that audio and video. I even know of one church, one pastor who's taken this so seriously. He wants to have quality church online. He wants to provide a quality church online experience for his viewers. but at the same time, he's not confident in the way they're set up in their actual sanctuary to do this. So what he does, they're a smaller church. He only has, and they're only having one weekend service right now. And so what he does is he actually treats his church online as a second service. He's not going live, but he is going. And I don't know what order he's doing it in. I don't know if he's doing the live first, or preaching to his in-person audience first, or going to the camera, whatever it is. But he's treating it rather as a second service, and he's actually addressing the camera. And there's a lot of benefits to this, because now you can maybe even address your online audience in ways that you couldn't if you were just there with your live audience. Again, it's completely your call, but just don't fall for the myth of live stream. Just because live stream is possible and doable doesn't mean you have to, and doesn't even mean that you need to. You can put quality audio first, then video. You can put that out there, pre-record it, simulate it live if you want, and provide a better church online experience than most churches are with live stream. So that's my note about live stream. The last extra bell and whistle to consider is the mobile app. Now, this falls in the same category as live streaming. If you want to create an app that is both aesthetically pleasing and practically functional, it actually requires a really big investment. In fact, the average corporation spends anywhere from $50,000 to $500,000 to develop their app. And obviously, there's a lot of different variables and factors, and so to do it right, it's an incredible investment. Apple's App Store, not to mention, has a ton of regulations when it comes to publishing apps, and they're obviously the biggest app platform out there. So they can make it really difficult. And there are these app templates out there, and these kind of services that offer, that advertises a drag and drop type of app service. But really, they're kind of clunky at best in my experience. Getting a good church app might be more affordable and accessible in the future, but we're just not there yet. And I know there's apps available through different, external services, like some giving platforms offer it, some type of app. I'm not saying don't take advantage of some of those things, but by and large, mobile app doesn't need to be your priority, because to do it right, an actual standalone mobile app for your church takes a lot of resource, a lot of time. And for most churches, it's just not worth it. So instead, I recommend that you prioritize a couple of areas. First, going back to having a mobile-friendly website. We already discussed that. But again, this is why it's so important to have a website that is mobile friendly, because then it's kind of like, okay, well, do I really need an app? Because, hey, my website works great on mobile. And then this is another reason you want to try to strengthen your social media presence, because then you can take advantage of the mobile and social media apps that are already being used every day to connect with people. People are already there. You don't have to convince them to download one more app. They're already on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. And then you can tap into their features of these apps, such as push notifications that can engage the mobile users. If they follow you, they could get push notifications whenever you put out updates. And so this is a way to keep people engaged on mobile without having a mobile app. So now I know I said there was the last thing. There's one more thing I did want to touch in, because it kind of could potentially integrate with a mobile app or website. That's login portals. To keep it simple, only offer this if you know what you're doing, and if you're using a church management software that offers it. Either way, it doesn't need to be a dominant element of your site. It needs to be something on the bottom footer menu. If you say, well, why would I need that? Then leave it at that. You probably don't. And then everything else. There's really no limit to what you can do with a website and the power of the internet. Whatever ideas you have for your website, you need to ask yourself these three important questions before implementing it. The first question is this: would this content fit into a section or page that I already have on my website? Okay, so a lot of this goes back to the connect page. Okay, a lot of things that you want to do, I'm 90% sure you could plug it into the connect page somewhere. So, I have this new ministry that we're launching. Okay. There, make it part of the connect page. We have this new activity we're going to offer. Okay, boom, Connect page. There it goes. It's there. It's ready to go. We just came up with this new, small group or whatever. Well, boom, fits right into the Connect page. So a lot of times you already have a place on your website for it that is that might be appropriate. So ask yourself that question. Do I already have a place where it goes? And a lot of times the answer is yes. The second thing is, will this idea complement the purpose of my website and my church, as far as my church's mission as a whole? So again, your mission for your church is unique to your church, but overall, the mission of your website is similar, and that is you're trying to appeal and reach those first-time visitors. So you always have to keep that in mind. If what you're thinking about adding is going to compromise that, then just don't do it. Because here's the thing, going back to picking on blogs again, if you have a blog and you started it and you only put out 2 or 3 posts and then you left it dead, and the last time that your blog displays the last post that you updated was in 2012, well, when somebody goes to your website and they happen to stumble upon your blog page, they might think, oh, well, they never update their blog. Do they really care? Do they really do much of their church? I wonder when the last time they updated their church or did anything to church. All these thoughts can flush through people's heads and this subliminal communication. And so you have to keep that in mind. Will this complement the purpose of my website? Will it help? Will it hurt? You have to ask this question. And the last question, and this is a big one, am I willing to commit the time, energy, and resource that's going to be required to effectively and excellently maintain this aspect of my website? So we talk about, again, I'm picking on blogs, mobile apps, all of these different things, they require your attention. And websites in general, they require regular maintenance. If you're not doing something weekly to, update your website, whether that's add the latest sermon or, just make sure you're not keeping your events page, keeping the, if you do have events featured on your website, making sure they're current. I wonder right now, just a side note, I wonder how many church websites out there are still featuring Easter. I wonder. I bet it's quite a few more than we'd like to admit. And that seems to be a big thing is, hey, you get something on the website and then you forget to update it. I've done it. I've been guilty of it with my own websites. But it's something that you have to be willing to maintain. You can never create a website or a feature or a section of a website that you aren't willing to maintain forever. Your website is an eternal commitment, really, when it comes down to it. As long as you are, if you're the web guy at your church, and that's your responsibility, whether you're the lead pastor, an assistant pastor, a volunteer, doesn't matter. If you are the person that is managing the website, you have a forever commitment. As long as you're involved with that church, you will have to update that website. And as long as that church has that website, somebody at that church will have to update that website in order for it to be effective. So never, ever create a website or part of a website that you aren't willing to maintain forever. I hope you have enjoyed and that this has brought you some value, this content, this coaching series about making the most of your website. And if you did find value in it, then I first hope that you'll share it with someone else. And I do want to say this, if you want to take it to the next level, if what you've learned here you find valuable and you say, yeah, I want to do more with this, then I want to help you. I want to help you take it to the next level by offering you a completely free website audit with me, where I'm going to go through and I'm going to look at your website. And I'm going to walk through it with you live in real time and tell you what I think, first impressions, things that you can change, things you can tweak, and so on and so forth. And this is something what we're offering completely free. Once again, this is accessed at churchmediahq.com/web. Any of the resources that we've talked about websites is going to be featured here at churchmediahq.com/web. Well, thanks again for joining us for this episode of Church Media HQ. If you haven't yet, I hope you will subscribe wherever you are listening to podcasts. And I do want to challenge you. I hope that you found this content valuable. If you have, then share it with another church leader so that they can be helped as well. Something as simple as just liking and sharing a video on YouTube and Facebook can actually go a long way. So I thank you in advance for liking and sharing and helping this content get seen by others like you. Church Media HQ is a production of the Must Increase Network. The show is edited and produced by Bo Snyder. Executive producer and host is myself, Luke Clayton. And until next time, I want to remind you, whether it's with your website or with something else, it's time for you to try something new. Why? Well, because it is so much better to fail at trying the incredible than to succeed at doing the average. We'll see you next time here on Church Media HQ.